Like we've said, today we come to love actively as our theme. Love is one of those words that we use a lot in church. We use it a lot when we talk about our Christian faith. We use it so much that we can start to wonder what it really means. Did you ever, as a kid, repeat a word over and over so much that it eventually you ended up laughing because it sounds so meaningless and so funny? Sometimes I worry about that fate for how often we use the word love in church. So, thinking of it as love actively might make it a little better. I think most of us would already say that love needs to be more than just a warm or sentimental feeling. The notion that it is more verb than noun is a good start. But I also think that love needs a body to be active and apparent to us. We need that example, and we have that in Jesus, a life that fully lived out God's love. We may think of love as squishy and sweet and sentimental, but Jesus' life has us rethink that. Jesus' life shows us the demands of love, how love calls us to take risks, to go against the crowd, to stand with those with no power in our society. Try buying a greeting card with that sentiment. It's really hard to see love if it doesn't have a body in action. We know from the Bible, faith without works is dead. So I wonder, is love without action really love? How does a baby come to know that they are loved? A starting point is a parent who cares for them by feeding them, changing their diapers, keeping them warm and safe and dry. If a parent can't manage those basic tasks, it's very serious, and we call it neglect. The young child will have failure to thrive. Love, too, has failure to thrive when we don't tend to it. But what good fortune we have in that God gives us lots of neighbors, and we have lots of opportunities to practice loving actively. That's all well and good, but what could this look like? For me, when I think of love actively, I think of our dear friends who we now count as family. I think of meeting them days, really more like hours after they arrived in the United States as refugees from the war in Bosnia back in the 90s. They arrived like so many immigrants, not knowing a word of English, leaving behind their country, their families, and any dreams or hopes they had for just a normal, ordinary life in their country. Normal didn't exist anymore because this life completely dissolved when war broke out. Normal life was gone, and their homeland forever changed. I have visited Bosnia many times in the span from 10 years after the war to now 30 years since the Dayton Accords ended the war. And even I know in my very limited experience that you can't go back and pick up where you left off after a war. Life is forever changed, its course forever altered. There are immeasurable losses that cannot be corrected. I don't know if they even can be healed. There is moving forward, a carrying on, but the scars persist in the landscape and in the people. The traumas are passed forward in the generations. Even if they're not spoken of, they're literally passed down in the DNA. Of course we can learn, we can try to do better. Good things certainly come, new life grows. But there is no denying what was lost. It is an abyss of sorrow. All of that was something I learned from my dear friends, mostly without words, mostly from intuition and feeling, mostly from sitting with them, trying to communicate with the help of this little yellow dictionary that didn't always have the word that we were looking for. And you got to remember, that was way back before Google Translate or Zoom or even Skype. The only way that I could love my new dear neighbors was actively, by showing up, taking off my shoes at the door, by sitting on their couch, by learning how to drink very strong, thick Bosnian coffee, and by holding their hands when news from the war showed up on the evening news. I loved my new sisters by trying to find the best shampoo for them because their hair was falling out. We thought it was just because the water was different here. It seems strange to me now that it didn't occur to us that it was from the stress of being driven from their home, their husbands being imprisoned and tortured in a concentration camp, and waiting and hoping day after day for their release so they could be resettled in the US. We loved my new brother, who never smiled and rarely spoke, by helping him with his English homework. We didn't know before the war how funny he was, always the life of the party, a real jokester. We loved them by trying to connect with the Red Cross to get news of their friends and relatives. And my mama gave them all big mama love because they were separated from their parents and families still in Bosnia. Mom was in the delivery room when my sister's son was born, her first child after miscarriages and a stillborn baby in Bosnia. Mom went to countless doctor's appointments and learned how to ask where it hurts, the name of body parts and of a few animals. And Bill, no surprise here, learned words to make them laugh. And I mastered a few of their Serbo-Croatian tongue twisters they learned in school. But the best times came from the ones I just couldn't get, no matter how hard I tried. Most of the things I know and love about my Bosnian family, I don't really have words for. It all comes from those pre-verbal days, our toddler times, before we really knew enough to communicate well. But our hearts were bonded because we were there with each other. To me, that is actively loving. That experience formed me. It formed my faith and my views of peace and justice and life. I would not be a pastor, let alone the person I am today, without that experience. I may have been helping my friends resettle, but it was a time of tremendous grace and growth for me, and it opened a door to my anger. I was feeling the effects of real evil on human beings. War and violence were no longer a concept, but a reality that hurt the mind, body, soul, and spirit of my friends. I will never forget the summer after our friends arrived when the genocide happened in Srebrenica. Over 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys were killed by Bosnian Serb forces while in a UN-protected safe zone. Also, over 20,000 civilians were expelled from the area, ethnic cleansing. It enraged me that this was happening, that human beings were doing this to other human beings, and we were sitting there watching it happen on TV. Seeing it unfold on the news opened wide the wounds of my family's trauma. They looked for people they knew in the footage, for familiar faces, and so did I. I remember catching myself doing that. I couldn't possibly see anyone that I recognized, but that is the active love that God calls us to, that God draws us into. That person fleeing, that asylum seeker, there is a connection with our common humanity. In their eyes, we see ourselves. We cannot know their experience, but we have compassion and empathy. That suffering feels personal to us. Truly, until all of us are free, none of us are free. That is at the heart of Christianity, of Jesus' message. It is at the heart of our collective humanity. In Judaism, there is a concept that if you save one life, it is as if you save the world. I love this. It gives us hope when we despair that our small actions can't make a difference. They can. I was raised and socialized to be a nice, polite girl. Anybody else raised that way? Yeah. Unconsciously, mostly, boys were of more value than girls. And that's not uncommon, I know. Anger wasn't one of our go-to emotions in my family. Anger was scary. It came out in my relatives who were alcoholics when they were drinking, and that was pretty scary as a child to me. But I was and am lucky to have a great dad. My dad is so calm and even-keeled. He rarely worries. He's steady and a man of few words. He doesn't raise his voice. I really only remember him getting angry once. It probably won't surprise you to know that it was on a family vacation during a long, hot car ride in the desert out west. And the air conditioning wasn't working in the rental car. We were lost, and my sister and I thought we were being hilarious in the back seat, laughing and loudly carrying on. Well, after a while, my poor dad finally snapped. He stopped the car and raised his voice to say to my sister, of course it was my sister and not me, but he said, "Emily, if you don't stop it, you and I are going to go for a little walk." Well, my sister was eager to get out of the car and said enthusiastically, "Where, Daddy, where?" Dad sputtered. He got red in the face and he declared, "Over there," pointing to a scrubby desert bush. "Over there, and I'm gonna thrash you down a little bit." Not only did my dad never yell at us, he also never laid a hand on us to spank us or discipline us. Thrash you down? Thrash you down? My mom, sister, and I repeated his words and busted out laughing hysterically, kind of like the hyenas in The Lion King. And that was my poor father's last attempt at expressing his anger. Oh, we know anger is a tough emotion. It is so primal. It can feel so big and overwhelming. We can struggle to control it. It can overtake us. Anger can be poisonous and contagious. It's not wrong to be afraid of it sometimes. But I think that anger is a part of love. We want to give love all of the lovely stuff, the lovey-dovey stuff. But love is big enough and strong enough to contain the hard stuff too, like anger, hate, resentment, all of our shadowy impulses. Did you notice that our scripture today made a reference to the Shema, a very important Jewish prayer that is central to faith? It begins, "The Lord is our God, the Lord is one." What follows details the particular ways in which that faith should be lived. But if God is one, certainly love can hold together as one also. Love can tease out of us what our anger is about. Often our anger is a clue. It is kind of like a detector going off that needs immediate investigation. You would pay attention to a smoke or a carbon monoxide alarm beeping. Anger warrants our attention. Anger is a warning that a boundary has been crossed. We all have our here I stand positions, and anger alerts us that our space has been violated. Pay attention to that. Anger is also energy. Anger can fuel us, give us the kick we need to get our butts moving, pulling us out of our depression or overwhelmed state. We want to be able to channel our anger in ways that do not hurt us or others. We don't want our anger to pull us off course. We don't want our anger to control us or consume us. We want to be able to harness our anger for good, like a good fire, for good projects or for good trouble, as John Lewis taught us. We have all of these big feelings. The problem can come in when the feelings have us. Do we have a little breathing room? Is there some space between our feelings and, they can be strong? Is there any distance between our feelings and our reaction? That's where we want to have some maturity, where we can take a breath, where we can give ourselves some space. Anger is one of those emotions that we really feel in our body. Where do you feel anger in your body? Does your heart pound? Do you get short of breath? Sometimes our face flushes, our nostrils flare, our teeth clench, and our jaw tightens. How does your neck feel when you're angry? And how about your blood pressure? Our body gets our attention that something significant is happening. Let's pay attention to our anger. Anger also contains the belief that things can be different. Something doesn't sit right with us with how things are now. It could be another way. Anger points out to us our desires and our dreams. That seems like love, doesn't it? Or at least it's somehow near love, love adjacent at the very least. During this very unsettled time in our country when changes are happening so quickly and we feel hard-pressed to keep up with so much news, we need our anger. We need it to keep us honest with how we're feeling about what we see. Anger turns our attention back when we slide too far into complacency. But too much anger can also be a clue that we need a time out to care for ourselves, for our mental health. We always hear, work on your anger, let it go and move on. But I say, not so fast. Let's hold on to it, but not let it hold us. We need to work together to see signs of God's kingdom during these difficult days. And the work is hard, like squeezing out that last bit of toothpaste in a tube. But anger in a group is indeed scary. Folks who can be conscious of their anger and work with their anger in constructive ways, those are the adults in the room, and they are in the minority for sure. I believe with Jesus as our guide and example, we can do just that. We can look at our anger. We can find ways to harness it. We can use it to make good trouble. God, forgive me, but not for my anger, but for the days when I am not angry enough. That's the real sin. That is truly missing the mark. When I forget that the refugees I see denied access to asylum and resettlement in our country, when I don't see my family and their suffering, when I forget how morally reprehensible it is that our system to welcome refugees and immigrants has been dismantled and harmed in irreparable ways, then that is the problem, not that I am angry about it. God, forgive our confusion and set us on the path of active love. We are responsible and capable of finding ways to use our anger this God-given alarm system that tells us something is off in our personal lives, in our life together as a nation. When the anger alarm goes off, know that God is close by in our conscience telling us, you can do better. God is calling us to do better. Let's not be afraid of our anger. Let's love and support each other in growing in our ability to face, to understand, and to direct our anger. May no one be harmed by anger. May our anger fuel us to follow Jesus and love actively. The stakes are very high. They asked Jesus, "Which commandment is the first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength.' The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." May we love actively. May it be so. Amen.